right, well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us here on another edition. This is a lot of fun. We're having such a great time having these shows for you and interviewing these amazing guests. So thank you for taking time out of your day and joining us for another edition here of Extreme Health Radio. This is extremehealthradio.com/54. And on that show page, you'll be able to find the show notes and the interview and all of that good stuff, the transcription and reference materials. We are currently broadcasting worldwide from Southern California. We do shows 3 days a week on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And if you would like to follow us on Facebook, feel free to do so. We would love to have you a part of our community. You can just go to extremehealthradio.com/Facebook and find us on there. And it would be an honor to have you follow us. And thank you to Mr. Mike Adams of naturalnewsradio.com for having us on his network. We really, really appreciate that. And today is Friday, January 5th, 2013. I can't believe it's 2013 already. It's amazing. Time is just flying by. Pretty soon it's going to be summer. If you have any questions for our guest ever or for me, just email them to justin@extremehealthradio.com and I will ask the guest your question, or you could even call in your question to 949-391-7363 and I can play your question to our guest on the air. And I wanted to let you know that this show is brought to you by Amazon.com. You can support our work anytime you make a purchase from Amazon.com. If you just go to extremehealthradio.com/Amazon, that'll just redirect you over there. We'll get a little commission for your order, and that would be a great way for you to support us. So we appreciate all of you people who are already doing that. So thank you so much. And we have a great show schedule coming up. On Monday, we've got Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, and he wrote a book called Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease. That should be a good show. Cancer and heart disease are obviously the top two killers here, so preventing those things would be a good thing. So that should be a fun show with Dr. Esselstyn. And then on Wednesday, we've got Dr. Doris Rapp, who is an expert in toxicology and toxins and poisons and environmental hazards and things like that. So she'll be talking to us about how to create a non-toxic living space and working space. And then on Friday, we've got Raymond Francis from Beyond Health. He's doing a lot of amazing work. He's got supplements and he's written books and gives lectures and all that kind of stuff. So Raymond Francis will be on the show. Today we have Sandor Katz, and he's going to be teaching us about fermentation. And he's written a book called Wild Fermentation. His most recent book is called The Art of Fermentation. That was released in 2012. And he is the guru, I think, of all things fermentation and bacteria and cultures and things like that. So thanks, Sandor, for being on the show today. Appreciate that.
It is my pleasure to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. So your new book just came out recently, in 2012.
Yes, the Art of Fermentation just came out during 2012, and Wild Fermentation now is 10 years old. It came out in 2003. That's my earlier book about fermentation.
And was that your first
of course,
book?
People have been fermenting for 10,000 years, so we're just the latest entries.
All right. So your first book is 10 years old, and it's still selling well. I imagine it's kind of the Bible of fermenting foods, isn't it?
I've heard a few people say that. I would be reluctant to use language like that myself, but sure.
That's cool. So how were you able to write so much about fermentation? I mean, it must be a subject that most people don't know about. But
fermentation is, it's practiced all around the world in, a vast array of different styles. Any food can be fermented. By some estimates, as much as 1/3 of all food that human beings put into our mouths has been subjected to fermentation before we eat it. And the realms of fermentation are very varied and distinct. I mean, alcoholic beverages are certainly the most famous agents of, or most famous examples of products of fermentation, but breads are all ferments, cheeses are all ferments, Most of the condiments that we love to put on our food are ferments, and fermentation's been an essential strategy in different parts of the world, both to preserve food from seasons of relative abundance, to feed people through seasons of relative scarcity, but also to make food, to detoxify certain foods, to make foods more digestible, and let's not forget about making them more delicious.
Wow. And so are some of these foods that people typically consume and don't know they're fermented, like ketchup and things like that, do those contain good bacteria or not really?
Well, I mean, okay, there's a few concepts. So I like to distinguish live culture foods as a subset of fermented foods. All fermented foods involve the action of microorganisms, either bacteria or in certain cases, fungi. But, many types of foods, like, you use the example of ketchup. Ketchup uses vinegar as its stabilizer. Vinegar is a product of fermentation, but, most commercial vinegar in our time is subjected to pasteurization, heat, in order to kill the bacteria in it. And certainly in the preparation of the ketchup, it all gets cooked. So ketchup would be an example of a food that involves some fermentation because that's the way vinegar is made. But the food itself does not contain live bacterial cultures. So ketchup, unless you make your own ketchup and add cultures, after the preparation, ketchup is typically not a food that contains live bacterial cultures. Yogurt contains live bacterial cultures. Kefir does. Sauerkraut, if it hasn't been pasteurized, for distribution and retail sales. Many foods can, in their raw state, have live cultures, but in our sort of typical methods of packaging them and distributing them, they end up being pasteurized for shelf stability.
Okay, so breads, you said, are fermented. I was under the impression that like sourdough would be fermented, but you're saying most breads too?
Well, I'm saying, yeah, sure. I mean, the difference between a sourdough and your sort of, conventional bread made in our time is that, for the last 100 years, microbiologists have had the ability to isolate particular organisms. So yeast has been isolated and propagated, and so you can go into any supermarket and buy a packet of yeast, and that's how most people are making bread is, fast breads that just rise for a couple of hours, and that is only possible when you use sort of, concentrated yeast. The traditional way that people have made breads is with mixed communities that involve yeasts and bacteria. An important concept is that in the natural world, you never find singular microorganisms. Microorganisms always exist in communities. So, on the grains, you would find yeast, and you would also find lactic acid bacteria and other types of bacteria. And so what spontaneously develops when you moisten flour is a mixed community that we call a sourdough. And, certainly, sourdough takes a little bit more time and probably a little bit more nuanced technique to work with. But, it basically makes the bread more nutritious, more delicious, and it enables it to be stable for a much longer period of time.
Interesting.
So, there are trade-offs, and we've traded off a lot of the benefits for the convenience of, the fast-rising bread you can make with pure yeasts. But they're all fermented. So
what is the difference between, bacteria and yeast?
Well, they're different classifications of life forms. Okay. Bacteria are generally regarded as the most ancient form of life. All other life on Earth is descended from bacteria, and they are single-celled organisms where the genetic material is not contained in a nucleus. So they have free-floating genetics, and this enables them to have enormous genetic flexibility and the ability to shed genes that are no longer necessary, and to the degree that they're present in their environment, to take in new genes that give them new metabolic capabilities. Yeah. Bacteria are single-cell organisms with a huge amount of genetic flexibility, whereas fungi are typically multi-celled organisms, and they are more genetically fixed in that their genetic material is contained in a nucleus. So yeasts and various kinds of molds that are used in different ferments are categorized as fungi. And then on the bacterial end, there's lots of different types of bacteria that appear in different ferments. So the lactic acid bacteria perhaps are the most famous ones. Acetobacter is the class of bacteria that make acetic acid, which is vinegar. There are some alkaline bacteria such as Bacillus subtilis that are used in ferments in certain parts of the world. Mm-hmm. Of course, within a broad classification like lactic acid bacteria, there are actually many different types of bacteria, different species, different strains. Although increasingly microbiologists are regarding bacteria as a single superspecies because of this genetic flexibility that I was just describing.
Interesting. So you just mentioned lactic acid. Isn't that the same substance that they talk about is involved in cancer, or when you exercise too much and you get this lactic acid in your body? Is that the same as the lactic acid?
Well, sure. I mean, we are descended from bacteria, and so the essential metabolic processes that emerge in bacteria are the processes that are embedded in our cells, and so our cells are capable of oxidative metabolism that involves respiration. That's the way we typically operate. That's our most efficient mode of using energy. Mm-hmm. But if we call upon our muscles to do more work, then we are providing them sufficient oxygen to do, then they revert to this fermentative mode, this anaerobic mode of metabolism, where they produce energy without oxygen, and create as a byproduct lactic acid. So when you get that muscle burn feeling, that is lactic acid. So yes, I mean there is a connection between these, the microbial processes that occur in our foods and the cellular processes that occur in our bodies. But there's no issue with consuming lactic acid foods does not increase the lactic acid in your muscles in any way. Oh, okay. And in fact, for people who are concerned about the acid alkaline balance in their bodies, it's a little bit counterintuitive, but typically fermented acidic foods have a net alkalinizing effect in our bodies. Mostly because they make minerals in the food so much more bioavailable. So even if the food itself is acidic, the net effect in our body is to alkalinize it.
So we're mainly bacteria then, our bodies and our guts and all that, right?
Well, sure. I mean, the biologists who count the cells of our bodies long ago came to the conclusion that the cells that we each possess that reflect our own unique individual DNA, what we would call the cells of our body, mm-hmm. are outnumbered in our bodies 10-1 by bacteria that we are host to.
Wow.
Yeah, and I mean, we all get indoctrinated, at least anyone growing up in the United States in the 20th or the 21st century is receiving a thorough indoctrination mm-hmm. into the idea that bacteria are bad. We should try to kill all bacteria. But, in fact, we could not possibly function without bacteria. I mean, beginning with our reproduction. Human beings cannot effectively reproduce without lactic acid bacteria that reside in women's bodies. And actually, women's bodies produce a specific nutrient to maintain this population of lactic acid bacteria that maintain an acidic environment that facilitates our reproduction. What enables babies to begin to digest food, much more than their ability to masticate with their teeth, is the buildup of a critical mass of bacteria in their intestines. So, bacteria enable us to digest food. Bacteria synthesize certain essential nutrients for us. And in the last couple of years, there's been a lot of new new insights into ways in which bacteria mediate our immune responses. Bacteria in our gut mediate the immune responses in other parts of our bodies. We only have the crudest understanding of what the mechanisms of this, regulatory function might be. But it has been demonstrated that bacteria are critical links in our immune responses. And then the latest research is brain chemistry, suggesting that the release of serotonin and other, types of, chemicals that regulate our brain function, how we feel, actually are mediated by bacteria in our gut. So it's really a misguided notion, this idea that, bacteria are bad and we should kill them all. Without denying that there are bacteria that can make us sick, we also have to recognize that bacteria are essential to our healthy functioning, and bacteria are our ancestors on this earth. And like every other form of life on this earth, we have never existed without bacteria. They just have been the context in which we evolved and exist.
Yeah, there's just been a war on bacteria. Like you said, I mean, it starts from day one, and people are seeing commercials for, all these different hand sanitizers and things to get rid of bacteria. And
right, exactly. I mean, what sexier slogan could a soap manufacturer, put on a package of soap than, telling people that it kills 99.9% of bacteria, when that is not a desirable thing at all. Really what protects us from the 0.1% of bacteria that have the potential to make us sick are the 99.9% of bacteria that we can coexist with perfectly well.
So it's more about finding a way to coexist and finding a homeostasis and finding, a balance between the good and the bad, right? Than it is just wiping out everything.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's really a bad idea to wipe out everything. I mean, what we need to be doing is, sort of promoting healthy microbial communities in our bodies. And one of the ways to do this is to sort of, eat foods that are rich in live bacterial cultures, as well as doing what we can to avoid all the chemical compounds, that are ubiquitous in our world that, kill bacteria.
Yeah, I've been getting into fermentation myself for quite a few years, actually. But it's such an amazing food, and it's such an easy thing to, even if people don't want to make it themselves, they can just buy it, even if they just did something, right?
Sure. I mean, there are more and more good quality, small artisanal, local, fermentation businesses developing, all over the United States anyway. And it is easy to make yourself. I mean, really, like what I always recommend that people start with as a beginner project is, sauerkraut or kimchi or some form of chopped up fermented vegetables. Incredibly easy. All you do is you chop your vegetables, lightly salt them, squeeze them with your hands for a few minutes until they get really juicy, and stuff them in a jar. You can use lots of different types of vegetables. There's no critical amount of salt, really just salt it to taste. This is an intrinsically safe food. In the United States, there never has been a case of food poisoning documented from fermented vegetables. You can't say that about many foods, so there's no risk. You don't need any special starter. You could let it ferment for months, but you also could begin enjoying it after just a few days, so you get some relatively immediate gratification. And it's, incredibly delicious and incredibly supportive of good health.
Yeah, they're delicious too. And we are with Sandor Katz, and his website is wildfermentation.com. And go over there and check it out. He's got lots of great information, articles and videos, and links to interviews he's done and all kinds of good stuff. That's wildfermentation.com. We got to take a short break. Fascinating information, but we'll be right back with Sandor Katz after this break. If you're looking to enjoy the best health possible, it's critical that you move. And if you sit in an office chair all day like I do, it's pretty much a guarantee that you are very, very stiff. We had a guy on our show named Lucas Rockwood, and he was on episode number 10. You can check that out. But he's got a product called Yoga Body Naturals, and I really, really love his product and his entire approach to yoga. and how yoga can improve your life in so many ways. So I highly recommend check it out at extremehealthradio.com/yoga. And it comes with a workbook, audio and video manuals. He also has physical products on his site too, like yoga trapezes, and he teaches you how to do certain poses to double your flexibility in 7 days. Could you imagine that? And being flexible in every area of your life is really, really a great thing. And yoga is a great part of my life. I love doing yoga. I also weight train and do weights and stuff like that. But yoga is really, really a great workout in addition to my life. So I really support Lucas Rockwood at Yoga Body Naturals. And please check out extremehealthradio.com/yoga if you're looking to get more flexible and to improve your digestion and to get on a better, healthier way of living. He's really got lots of great products on that website. So check that out. And also sign up for his mailing list too. He's got really, really a great email list going on there. So thanks for listening. You can check it out at extremehealthradio.com/yoga. And let's get back to this interview. All right, we're having a good time with Sandor Katz from wildfermentation.com, and we're learning a lot about fermented foods and the role of bacteria in our guts, and it's a lot of fun. So, Sandor, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned a few minutes ago how people can buy these foods in supermarkets and things like that. What do you think are the benefits or the drawbacks, do you think, of people buying probiotic capsules and things like that instead of buying the foods or making the foods themselves?
Well, I mean, I think that, well, first of all, just conceptually, I think that, any nutrient that you can get from a capsule, you can get better from food. Probably not as easy to get because, there's some preparation involved, but I think you can always get better nutrients from food than you can get from capsules. And most probiotics are basically single strains or perhaps a couple of single strains mixed together. And of course, what each probiotic manufacturer is claiming is that their strain or their collection of strains is the best. That will have the most dramatic effect in your body. The problem with this is that because of this genetic flexibility that I talked about earlier. I mean really the scientists at the cutting edge of microbiology are abandoning the concept of species for bacteria, and they're rethinking bacteria and species is a concept that applies to animals and plants that we have really projected upon bacteria, but because they can shift genes so easily and literally shape shift, they don't have stability of species. So when we're talking about bacterial stimulation in our bodies, I would say that diversity is the name of the game. And so, no single species gives you diversity, whereas eating a variety of different types of fermented foods does give you some diversity. Now, of course, most of the research in probiotics has been done on, proprietary strains. I mean, nobody's investing money in clinical trials for sauerkraut, for instance, because nobody owns sauerkraut. But there has been a little bit of very interesting research, focusing on real foods, traditional foods, rather than, proprietary probiotic strains. And the most interesting study that I've encountered was done in Spain. And basically what they did is they recruited a group of volunteers who were people who already incorporated a lot of bacterially rich foods into their diets. People who ate yogurt and cheeses and salamis and olives. They really included lots of different types of fermented bacterially rich foods. But they recruited people who ate at least 5 servings a week of those things in their normal lives. Then they did some baseline blood work where they looked at some markers of immune functioning. And then they put everyone on a deprivation diet. After several weeks of deprivation, they did more blood work, and they found that everybody's level of these immune indicators had been suppressed by lack of bacterial stimulation. Then they put half the people on traditional yogurt and half the people on one of these new improved probiotic yogurts. And they found that both groups regained approximately equal levels of immune functioning, but nobody regained their original levels until they were allowed to, start eating their diet rich in varied live culture foods.
Wow.
I think this really illustrates the idea that, at least in terms of bacteria in our bodies, diversity is its own reward.
Right.
And as wonderful as some of the probiotic strains might be, a single strain just never can be as powerful, as eating a variety of different types of bacteria.
Now, we had a Dr. Charles Partito on the show a while back, and he was talking about the different types of bacteria and stuff. And he was talking about how bacteria, they're very competitive and they kill each other and things like this. And he was talking about how if you take lots of different strains, many times, in one supplement or one food or something like that, many times you won't get the absorption of all the bacteria because some of them will kill the others. Does that happen?
Well, I mean, I don't know what that means, the absorption of all the bacteria. I mean, when you eat bacteria, it doesn't all take up residence in your intestine because your intestine is already, unless you're very, very unhealthy, every ecological niche in your intestines should already be populated by bacteria. And it's not, they're not just moving over and letting the new ones coming in take up residence. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of question and unclarity about, what is the mechanism of the stimulation that our bodies receive from probiotics, because it's not as simple as the bacteria that we digest take up residence in our intestines. The way I have come to visualize it is that we are increasing the range of genetics that are available to the bacteria that are in our intestines.
Okay.
For them to exchange bacteria with.
Do you think, as far as bacteria goes, it's kind of similar to health? I'm under the contention that we really don't know probably 99% of what's really going on in health. And do you it's probably the same way with bacteria?
Oh my God! Well, with bacteria, I would say it's even more. I mean, really, I mean, until the last couple of decades, we have really only been thinking about bacteria as our enemies.
Yeah.
And so, it's really a relatively new thing that we're looking at the ways in which, bacteria, actually are important to us. And, same in the realm of soil science. I mean, bacteria are the source of life and fertility in our soil. But, in general, agriculture is just beginning to, sort of look at that and attempt to understand it.
Right. Yeah. I think we're just scratching the surface.
These are rich communities.
And, is it true that when we eat bacteria and we eat foods that are high in bacteria and things like that, that when we digest food, that the food doesn't it's not like you eat calcium or you eat phosphorus and it gets first sort of passed through the bacteria, and then the bacteria's byproducts is what goes through the villi into your bloodstream? Is that kind of how it works?
Well, I'd say, I mean, it's not just with minerals. I mean, I would say, in general, like a huge amount of our digestive processes involve bacteria in our gut, basically digesting compound nutrients into more elemental forms that our cells can absorb.
So it's the byproduct of the bacteria, this relationship with the food that we eat is the minerals.
One of the ways that microorganisms transform food through fermentation, and it also continues to some degree in our bodies, except it's less time, is through a process that I would describe as pre-digestion. So, while the bacteria or other microorganisms are transforming our food, or the means by which they are transforming our food is digesting it. So yes, absolutely.
Wow. And so let's say if you're going to make a kefir and you just use conventional store milk with the antibiotics and the hormones and things like that, does the bacteria transmutate some of that stuff or offset the bad effects of it?
I mean, I couldn't say specifically. I mean, in that instance, I mean, I can tell you that there's a little bit of research looking at organophosphate residue on vegetables, and noting that in the sauerkraut fermentation, those are reduced to some degree. And certain, like let's say in soybeans, where there are these sort of phytoestrogens, those get broken down by the fermentation, so they're removed. But I can't really tell you in every particular case. Those are just a few specifics that I know about.
Right. Yeah. I guess it would just behoove us to start with the highest quality starter, like the best quality milk and things like that, organic and.
But, I mean, I would say that, for, in terms of the whole debate between, raw milk and pasteurized milk, for people who are working with pasteurized milk, I mean, certainly culturing it, using kefir or yogurt or, really any of the dozens of different types of milk cultures that exist in the world is a great way of re-enlivening the milk that has been, had its, living elements destroyed by pasteurization.
Oh, I see. So you can kind of make it a live food again, almost.
Yeah.
Interesting. Wow. So you must be fermenting all kinds of things in your house. You must have like an experimental lab going on there. You must be. I mean,
in various times more than others, but sure. I mean, I always have stuff fermenting.
What's the most wild thing?
I maintain a sourdough. I work with my sourdough quite a bit. I always have sauerkraut going. I have lots of different kinds of wines and meads going. I make yogurt all the time.
What's the trick with making yogurt?
Well, okay, there's a few issues. I mean, one is like, what are you using as your starter? I mean, you can go out and buy, any kind of plain flavored live culture yogurt and use that as a starter, but you'll probably only get a couple of generations out of it, and then it'll peter out. I mean, basically, almost all of the commercial yogurt that's available in the United States is made from, basically, individual bacteria that have been isolated and selected and propagated, and then usually it's a combination of 2 or 3 of these that are used as a yogurt starter. And they make fine yogurt, but they don't have the stability of an evolved community. What I got a hold of a few years ago is an heirloom yogurt culture from Bulgaria, and basically I've made something like 50 generations of yogurt from it, and that's worked out really well. My technique for making yogurt, which would apply whether you can get a hold of an heirloom yogurt culture or you're just using a store-bought yogurt, is I heat up the milk to about 180 degrees. I heat it slowly. I stir it a lot. And then I cool it down to about 115 degrees. Meanwhile, I'm preheating with hot water what we would normally think of as an insulated cooler, but I'm going to be using it as an insulated warmer.
Okay.
Yogurt is a thermophilic ferment, which means that the bacteria are really only active at elevated temperatures. So you try to keep everything between 110 and 115 degrees Fahrenheit. So once the milk cools down to the appropriate temperature range and your incubation chamber is heated up to the appropriate temperature range, then you add mature yogurt to your milk in the jars that you want to make it in. Mix that up well, and then put it in the incubation chamber, and I leave it usually for about 4 to 6 hours. And then I take it out, let it come to room temperature, and then put it in the fridge and enjoy it at my leisure.
Oh my gosh, that sounds so good.
So it involves a little bit of temperature manipulation. That's the hard part about making yogurt, is like you got to heat it up and cool it down to get a really thick yogurt. If you're, some people like to make raw milk yogurt where they don't heat it all the way up to 180 degrees, but it turns out that the heating, what it does is it denatures the proteins and enables the bacteria to basically reconfigure the protein structure structure, and that's how yogurt turns a liquid food into a solid food.
Oh.
So if you try to make a raw milk yogurt and skip the heating all the way up and then cooling down, and just if you only heat it up to 110 or 115, then you can still make yogurt. It'll certainly be wonderful and probiotic, but it won't be quite as thick as the yogurt we're used to, or the yogurt you can make if you heat up the milk higher to about 180.
Wow. Have you ever used one of those yogurt makers things that you see, on Amazon and things like that? Have you ever used those?
No. I mean, I've seen them. My uncle used to make yogurt in one of those. I mean, you certainly there's all sorts of tools that people have figured out to make fermentation, easier and more automated, and you can use those. Part of my mission has been, trying to demonstrate to people just the simplicity of doing these things at home, and that you don't need a lot of special gadgetry. Mm-hmm. So yeah, sure, if you have a yogurt maker, if you find a yogurt maker, if you can afford to buy special gadgetry, that's a really easy way of doing it. But really with a cooler that everyone already has somewhere, buried in their pantry or somewhere, you can do it too. People also use sometimes the oven with the pilot light on, or the oven with the illuminating light, or sometimes, over a heat source. Fermentation is something that, you can do, you can do it in ways where you use very special dedicated equipment, or you can do it the way people have done it throughout history, which is, improvisationally. People made yogurt before they had, easy household thermometers, and, they did it by sticking their finger in the milk and, just learning experientially how to gauge the appropriate temperature range.
If someone is thinking about doing this milk kefir, if they're lacto intolerant, I guess, does that get mitigated with the fermentation, do you think?
Yeah, what we group together as lactose intolerance, actually covers a range of different things. So, some people who describe their condition as lactose intolerance, probably have issues with milk or casein or things that won't necessarily be affected by fermentation. But if lactose is really the issue, all of the ferments involve consuming the lactose and breaking it down into lactic acid and other fermentation byproducts. So fermented milk products always have much less lactose than the milk that you begin with. So yes, I hear stories from many people who are able to enjoy yogurt or kefir, but are not able to, drink fresh fluid milk.
Wow.
And incidentally, I would also, put out the idea to you and your listeners that, fresh fluid milk is a 20th century phenomenon. Before the advent of widespread refrigeration, it just wasn't practical. Like the milk that got transported off of the farm was soured milk, because, milk is just not a viable product if you don't have a refrigerator. Or it just sours spontaneously. And throughout history, most of the milk that people have drunk is soured milk. And, yogurt is an example of a soured milk. We have this word in English that's become, I would say, antiquated, and that is clabbered milk. And clabbered milk is just milk left at room temperature until it begins to thicken up. That's the first stage of transformation, is the milk thickens up, and that's called clabber. And it's the product of clabbering, which is simply leaving the milk at room temperature. And you can only do that with raw milk. With pasteurized milk, it's a microbial blank slate, and, we all know from leaving the milk in the refrigerator too long, how nasty and really putrefied milk can become. Once we destroy the indigenous population of lactic acid bacteria that are in it, what will spontaneously arise in milk are really generally, not appealing bacteria.
Wow. Yeah, interesting stuff. We are with Sandor Katz. We got to take another break. We'll be right back after this break. Don't forget to check out his website, which is wildfermentation.com, and he gives lectures all around the country and abroad as well. So check it out. He may be coming to your area. So again, it's wildfermentation.com, and we'll be back with Sandor Katz after this break. Hey there, thanks so much for listening to the interview so far. Hey, I'm curious if you have heard of a thing called the Conscious Parenting Summit. You can find it at extremehealthradio.com/CPS, and it's put together by Matt and Angela Monarch, and it's really been blowing my mind lately how it's possible to bring forth a healthy child into the world. And they interview about 20 different experts who have been doing this for 30 years, and it's been blowing my mind just what I'm learning. It's turning everything upside down as far as what I thought was normal in our culture. And in that summit, you'll learn about things like circumcision, vaccinations, ways to increase fertility, how to eliminate stretch marks, how to calm your baby, how to, if you don't want to use diapers, you can actually do something where you can communicate with your child so they don't have to wear diapers. They'll let you know when they want to go to the bathroom. It's amazing. And water births and the role of doulas and midwives, how to have a home birth, the importance of skin-to-skin contact. I mean, it's just incredible. They talk about the dangers of C-section, breastfeeding, and it's just absolutely incredible. So I highly encourage you to check this out. If you want to get pregnant, or if you're struggling to get pregnant and you want to have the healthiest child possible, please take a look at this. It's extremehealthradio.com/CPS for Conscious Parenting Summit. So thanks for listening, and let's get back to this interview. All right, we're having a good time with Sandor Katz from wildfermentation.com. Make sure to visit his website. He's got some videos on there and audio links and all kinds of good stuff. So, Sandor, I wanted to ask you too, with the milk, where can people get these cultures? Where can they buy them, or can they get them from someone they know, or how does that work?
Well, I mean, in my new book, The Art of Fermentation, I have a resource section that lists how to obtain cultures. I mean, basically, there are all of these trading posts. I mean, so if you're comfortable just getting them from other individuals who have been doing them, most of these online trading posts are organized geographically, so you can find people, in your state, perhaps in your town or city, who you could just arrange to meet, or else someone from further away who would mail it to you, or they're also available commercially. On my website, wildfermentation.com, I have links to some of these places. The heirloom yogurt cultures, I really only know of one source, and it's a company called culturesforhealth.com, and they sell about a half a dozen different heirloom yogurt cultures. But really, if you look around, you can find them in your communities. There's kefir and kombucha are examples of cultures that are called SCOBYs, SCOBY, which stands for Symbiotic Communities of Bacteria and Yeast. And these are cultures that actually have evolved into distinctive physical forms. And everybody who maintains them over time ends up with way more of them than they know what to do with. So they're always eager to share the cultures.
Now, speaking of kombucha, the other day when I was making my kombucha and I let it go, I think I let it ferment for about 3 or 4 weeks or so. And I found...
Is that longer than usual?
Yeah, well, it was longer than usual because it's been a little bit colder here, so I figured I'll let it go.
Right. Kombucha really likes a warm environment.
Okay.
It takes a long time once you start getting down in the 60s.
And then when I looked at the top of the SCOBY, there was some moldy fuzz on top of the SCOBY. Does that mean that the entire batch is bad, or what do you think that means?
Well, I mean, let me tell you that, I mean, I have, drunk the kombucha underneath a moldy mother, mostly as a result of reading the warnings of a mycologist. I am not doing that anymore, and I'm, sort of encouraging people who have that happen to find a new mother to work with. But it may well be that it's not practical for you to make kombucha, during the cooler parts of the year. It really wants to be, 72 would pretty much be the minimum. I mean, really, it's much healthier if it can stay around 75. Kombucha just likes for it to be warm. And, one thing you can do is acidify it more at the beginning.
Okay.
If you know that the process is going to be slow because it's in a cool environment, like add a little bit more mature kombucha at the beginning just to maintain the level of acidity, because the acidity is the main thing that's inhibiting molds from growing on the surface.
Oh, interesting. So
but in any kind of a ferment, mold on the surface is your biggest challenge, because if you're creating an environment where most of the action is happening sort of underneath the air exposed section, but where it's exposed to the oxygen, there's always this vulnerability to molds developing. And your best protection against that is acidity. And if the acidity is going to be slow developing during the fermentation, then add a little bit more of the mature kombucha to start with a more acidic environment.
Okay. Wow. So the kombucha, is there a way to make your own SCOBY? I've seen videos where people do that.
Yeah, sure.
What do you think about that?
I mean, so the SCOBY, the physical manifestation, is this rubbery disc that develops on the surface. But if you take, live culture kombucha, generally without a lot of exotic flavorings, you'll have better results. A simple kombucha that is, basically tea and sugar, fermented. If you just, you could even do this with commercial kombucha, depending on the brand, because not all of them are using traditional kombucha SCOBYs these days.
Mm-hmm.
But if you take, a bottle of kombucha, pour it into a bowl, what you want to do is increase the surface area and the ratio of the surface to the volume. So like a nice shallow bowl with a large surface exposed is perfect. And just, pour the kombucha into that and then put a light cloth, like a little kitchen towel or something over that, just to keep flies and dust out, but allow for air circulation. Then you should find first a little film developing on that, and then as it sits longer, that film will get thicker, and that is a mother of kombucha.
Wow. So you can just kind of make your own SCOBY with a commercially bought drink, maybe.
Well, my caution with the commercial ones is that many of the commercial kombuchas, and I can't tell you exactly which ones because I don't know,
mm-hmm.
have moved from the traditional way of making kombucha with a kombucha SCOBY to using starters, sort of like I described earlier with yogurt. I mean,
mm-hmm.
It's just been the thrust of fermentation in the age of microbiology has been the attempt to improve upon the traditional cultures. And I have no doubt that for the mass producers, there must be benefits to working with the sort of more laboratory-derived starters. But I think for most generalists, it's ultimately disempowered the same ability to perpetuate themselves as the traditional cultures do.
So you make kombucha, and you probably make all kinds of other things. Do you ferment things like beans or mushrooms or?
Sure. I mean, I make miso. I make tempeh. Mushrooms, I mostly ferment, in mixed vegetable concoctions with cabbages and radishes or whatever. I mean, I ferment meats a little bit. I like making salamis and other types of cured meats. I play around a little bit with cheese making. I like to ferment lots of different kinds of things.
So when you ferment, like let's say you do a sauerkraut and you put in some chopped vegetables in there, whatever it is that you want to do you get different bacteria with each new vegetable you put in there, or is it going to kind of be the same?
I mean, you're always dealing with lactic acid bacteria, and there is a particular lactic acid bacteria that is found on all cereal. It's called Leuconostoc mesorentoides, and that's what typically initiates the sauerkraut fermentation. But sure, I mean, different vegetables, different growing environments, different regions will all produce, slightly different strains of bacteria. So, eating different kinds of vegetable ferments with different types of vegetables will yield to, a certain amount of, bacterial diversity.
So if I were to make sauerkraut in my kitchen, I might have a slightly different strain of bacteria than in your kitchen.
Yes, I mean, it has a little bit to do with the kitchen and probably more to do with the field where the cabbage or whatever vegetables were grown.
Okay. And when you're making sauerkraut, I have a big kraut maker, or, kraut container. And, I think we go through like 10 cabbages at a time, and it takes us quite a while. And so when we're massaging the cut up and the shredded cabbage to kind of break it down, like you talk about, is there a way to bypass that step and create a brine and just fill it up with the brine instead of having to massage it like that? Or
yeah, no? Sure. I mean, to me, the advantage of pulling the water out of the vegetables rather than adding water is just you get a much more concentrated flavor. You're not diluting the flavor of the vegetables at all.
Oh, okay.
The juices you're getting the vegetables submerged beneath is the juice of the vegetables themselves. So you get just a stronger flavor. But absolutely, if you can't squeeze the vegetables, or even more significantly, if you're trying to ferment whole vegetables, rather than shredded vegetables, then you just can't pull the water out of the vegetables, and so you have to mix up a saltwater brine and get the vegetables submerged under that. The most important thing in fermenting vegetables is to get the vegetables submerged under liquid to protect them from oxygen. How you do that, I would say you get the strongest flavor if you can pull the water out of the vegetables, but if that's not practical for whatever reason, then absolutely, just add some saltwater brine. But just, add as little water as you can to get the vegetables submerged.
Okay. And on your website, wildfermentation.com, I'm looking, you have a really cool forum here I just found. So I could go in here and ask questions and things like that as well. Yeah,
sure. I've got a support forum on there, absolutely. And if you look under the fermentation links, I mean, I'm just continually adding links to, new fermentation-related resources that I learn about. And there's really quite a bit of information out there. There's all these groups on Google and Facebook and doubtless many other locations on the World Wide Web where people are answering each other's questions about fermentation and drawing on their own experiences. This is something that people practice all around the world. So immigrants from Eastern Europe, immigrants from Korea, people from lots of different parts of the world, have experiences with different realms of fermentation. And so I think that there's a lot of, peer information sharing. And, that's the only way that I learned what I've learned about fermentation is just by talking to people.
Wow. So how old were you when you first fermented your first cabbage?
30.
30. And you are just, you kind of just fell in love with it right away.
I did. I actually fell in love with it before I was doing it because I as a kid I loved sour pickles, and I've always been drawn to the flavor of lactic acid fermentations. I mean, I can't tell you why. I've just always loved it. Decades before I ever chopped up a cabbage and turned it into sauerkraut myself, I loved the flavor. I was really drawn to it. But yeah, when I moved from New York City to rural Tennessee 20 years ago, and got involved in keeping a garden, I was such a naive city kid that it was a little bit of a surprise that all the cabbage was ready at the same time. And when I was faced with that, I remembered, oh my God, I love sauerkraut. I should figure out how to make sauerkraut. And so, I looked in some cookbooks and I learned how to make sauerkraut, and I literally have had a crock of sauerkraut going ever since then.
Nice. That's so cool. We got to cut out for natural.
Right now I have a 55-gallon wooden barrel.
Wow.
With radishes. My friend has a biodynamic farm and invites me every fall to harvest radishes, which he plants daikon radishes as a cover crop on acres of land. So I can pick 500 pounds of radishes and doesn't make a dent in his field. And then I bring them home and get people to come help me chop them up, and then I, share radish kraut with my friends and at my workshops all year.
Wow. Yeah, that's so interesting. And we got to cut out for Natural News Radio. Thank you to Mike Adams from naturalnewsradio.com for having us on his show. And what actually got me interested in doing this was when I heard Daniel Vitalis talk about how your immune system really is your bacteria, and you were kind of alluding to that earlier. And when I realized that there's such a huge correlation between your immune system and your gut flora, and people talk about how it's 80% of your immune system is in your gut, that's when I really started getting interested in doing fermentation and eating more and more fermented foods. And for that reason alone, people should start doing it, let alone the taste. I mean, the taste is just so great.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think fermentation has a lot of practical benefits. I mean, certainly the most important one throughout history has been preservation, people using it to preserve the harvest, and, places with limited growing seasons as a, strategy to take foods from seasons of relative, scarcity and abundance and enable them to feed us through seasons of relative scarcity. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, in terms of our immune system, I mean, these bacterially rich foods are really, really immune stimulating. And I mean, I got interested in this because of, flavor and the practical necessity for preservation. But, I feel like I have really, enjoyed the benefits of it. And, I feel like they keep me healthy. I mean, just this week, I mean, I feel like I'm watching friends all around me dropping like flies from this, like a flu that's going around, and, knock on wood, so far I haven't been affected by it. And, I mean, I can't really draw any conclusion about bacteria based on that single event. But, the way I think about it is, all these little bacteria are protecting me and, keeping my immunity strong.
Right. Yeah. I'm the same way. I mean, it's purely anecdotal, but I feel like I'm much, much healthier and don't get susceptible to sickness at all anymore since doing the fermented foods. Like you said, I can't say that that's it, but man, it sure feels like it.
But I mean, I have one little disclaimer that I would want to share, and that is that, I feel like there are a lot of unsubstantiated claims of particular foods curing particular conditions. For instance, you can find online websites that will tell you that kombucha is the cure to diabetes. I think that this is a little bit of a misrepresentation. And in fact, I would think for someone with diabetes, kombucha, which is sweetened tea partially fermented, would not be, the ideal ferment for stimulating your immunity. I would say something that didn't have sugar in it would be better. But anyway, what I'm trying to get at is that, when people claim that particular diseases are going to be cured by eating a particular food, it makes me extremely skeptical. And at the same time, I mean, I think we can't, deny the benefits of it. And I think, what I hear most consistently in the emails that I get is people who've had dramatic shifts in their digestive processes by incorporating these foods. People who had chronic digestive problems, whether they were, simple things like, constipation or acid reflux, or, much more, serious and disabling, things like Crohn's disease or irritable bowel syndrome. But many people have dramatic improvements in their digestive processes when they start incorporating live culture foods into their diets. And in terms of the immune stimulation, I think, whether you feel like you are the healthiest specimen in the world, whether you have just been diagnosed with some acute health crisis, whether you've been living with a chronic condition for years and years and will for the rest of your life, or if you're just feeling the effects of aging, by improving your immune function and, improving your ability to digest food and assimilate nutrients, that's a huge boon to anybody's health. And it doesn't have to cure a particular disease. We don't have to make outrageous, claims. They're giving us a lot already.
Yeah, and it kind of makes people turned off when they hear other people talk about how this stuff can heal cancer and all of that kind of stuff. I mean, it's kind of outlandish.
Right. Although there are fermentation byproducts in fermented vegetables, isothiocyanates that have been that are regarded as potent anti-carcinogenic compounds. So. There are potentially some really beneficial anti-cancer compounds in at least fermented vegetables.
So what's your favorite thing to ferment?
Well, I mean, I really like lots of them. I'm very devoted to sauerkraut. I love to eat sauerkraut. I have this 55 gallons of fermented radishes. And I love that. I mean, I love cheese. I mean, I don't think I've ever met a fermented dairy product I didn't like. I work with sourdough a lot. I make these savory sourdough pancakes where I use, I use vegetables and eggs and sourdough and maybe a little bit of cheese, and that's really become a staple food for me. And I like to experiment. I mean, I like to try different kinds of fermented foods from different parts of the world. I've been using this winter a fermented raw tomato paste that this guy from Italy, sent me this long email telling me how his grandparents used to preserve tomatoes for the winter. And so I tried the fermented raw tomato paste, and it's great. So I love to try different things, and that's what sort of led me into all of this wide-ranging experimentation and writing books about it. Is that it's just been a really fun and satisfying realm of experimentation and play, really.
Yeah, that sounds so good. And so you do lectures and talks around the country as well. I'm looking on your website, and you have a whole list of your upcoming events. Yeah,
I keep pretty busy. I'm just kind of getting to the end of a nice long stay-at-home vacation, and in a couple of weeks I'm heading out to Virginia to the Chesapeake Association of Sustainable Agriculture, and then later in January I'll be on the West Coast at the Eco Farm Conference, and then doing some workshops in Monterey and Santa Cruz. And then I'll be up in British Columbia, and I'm really over the course of the next 6 months, I will be back and forth across the United States and in a few places in the middle several times. So check out my website, wildfermentation.com, and you can see where I'll be presenting workshops and lectures. And if you're interested, come and check it out.
That's cool. Are those events typically free?
And then I also teach here in Tennessee, where I live. I have I maintain a kitchen classroom, and I do sort of more intensive teaching here, where people will come for usually 4 or 5 days and have like an intensive immersion in fermentation, and just to get a hands-on experience doing a dozen different types of ferments.
Wow.
Usually we make some miso, we make some tempeh, we make some sauerkraut, we make some mead, try to get a lot of different things in there.
Wow. And so are a lot of those events, are they free, or do you, or some of them paid and some free?
Yeah, it varies. Mm-hmm. It varies. No, I mean, the ones that I teach here, the more intensive ones, there's a fee, and in my traveling ones, some of them are part of paid events like conferences, and some of them are universities where they're providing it free of cost to the public. So if you look on the schedule, you can look at each event and figure out which one might be right for you.
That is so cool. Well, thank you, Sandor, for sharing your time with us and teaching us about fermentation. I appreciate that.
All right. Well, it is my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on your show.
Excellent. Would you mind holding as I close out the show?
No.
Awesome. Thanks. All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us on another edition of Extreme Health Radio. Really had a good time with Sandor Katz. Make sure to visit his website, which is wildfermentation.com. And thank you to Mike Adams of naturalnewsradio.com for having us on his network. And I just wanted to let everybody know that we are 100% listener supported. So we want to make sure to keep our website free for everybody. So if you can donate, we would greatly appreciate that. And I thank you to the recent people who have donated. It helps to pay the bills here, and so we really appreciate that. If you can't donate, though, no big deal. You can pass our link on to your friends, send our link on on Facebook, and click like and all that kind of good stuff. And we have a store too with lots of great products like rebounders and exercise equipment, blenders, things like that. So we've got lots of great products, e-products on our store. So check out our store for lots of great things. And I just want to thank you for spending time with us and learning about fermentation from Sandor Katz. And we had a great time. So thank you again for joining us. And if there's anything I could ever do for you, just email me, Justin@extremehealthradio.com, and I'd love to help you out.